It only takes a few seconds of listening to Bad Omens to realize that the vocals are the most important aspect of the music. When I discovered that the singer, Noah Sebastian, was also the main songwriter, it immediately became clear to me why Bad Omens sound the way that they do. In this video, we'll look at how I think Bad Omens approach songwriting, the technical aspects behind their decisions, and how you can easily incorporate that into your own songwriting process. Before we get into it, I think it's really important to give some general context. If the vocals are the most important element of the song, you want the rest of the band to get out of the way so that the singer can have the attention. Generally, if a guitarist or pianist is the main songwriter, the band will get either a little or a lot more attention, and as a consequence have much more to do. It definitely makes it more interesting for the band, but these extra bits can often narrow the options that the singer has. It's neither good nor bad, just different. In the case of Bad Omens, you're supposed to connect with Noah's incredible voice and the emotions he expresses through it. If you've got someone else trying to get attention at the same time, it will decrease the impact that the vocals have. I know that everyone wants themselves to be heard, but don't be the person that's trying to get attention when it clearly belongs to someone else. Once again, no option is right or wrong, but these boundaries should be clear within the band so the song can be the best version of itself. I hope this is clear, let's get into it. Chapter 1, 5 steps to write a Bad Omens song. Later in the video, we'll be looking at the melodic, harmonic, rhythmic, and tonal concepts in greater depth. But for now, let's look at the basic approach and ensure that we're putting our priorities in the right place. The best approach to writing a Bad Omens song is, you guessed it, start with the melody. And that's step 1, write a melody. As soon as you've got a melodic idea that's worth pursuing, start exploring the different vocal tones and in which vocal range make that melody sound best. The melody, tone, and range will influence each other, so let yourself fluidly explore these together. Also, be open to lyrical concepts at this point as well. Don't forget that Noah uses his beautiful, gentle, and potentially insecure falsetto just as much as he uses his powerful belt. It doesn't matter where you start tonally, but you should aim to cover a whole wide range of emotions within your song. Step 2, write a bass line. I would start with a synth bass, not a bass guitar, because a suitable synth tone will bring with it a whole bunch of atmosphere and energy. Don't get too technical. Any preset that enhances the mood will do. With this, we want to get some simple atmospheric and harmonic ideas flowing. This potentially introduces some rhythmic elements to your song, but only if you want it to. You will also likely find that this bass line influences the vocal melodies as well. Ideally, we want to rinse and repeat steps 1 and 2 until we've got enough material for a whole song. But this advice is useless if you're not an experienced songwriter. So step 3 is to identify the section. If this section feels like a verse, then you still know that you need to write a pre-chorus, a chorus, and a bridge before your work is done. Don't worry though, because pre-choruses and bridges are totally optional. If at any point in these first 3 steps you get stuck, I usually find that it's because I haven't got enough context to fully understand what my musical idea is. For example, you may feel like the chorus is a bit shit because it doesn't have any guitars. It's actually distracting you from doing other work because you really need to hear the guitars there to understand the section. If that's the case, throw in the guitars and then go back and start working on the more important things. So once you've completed step 3 and identified the section, then you've got 2 options. It's either go back to step 1 and write a new section, or go to step 4 and start writing a groove. Sometimes you can't understand how a melody is supposed to sound without putting a groove to it. Getting a clear emphasis on rhythm can be the difference of knowing whether your song is great or just average. Now, if you need to write more sections, go back to step 1. If, however, you've written enough material for a full song, let's go to step 5 and build some instrumentation. Add in the guitars, the drums, the bass, other synth instruments, harmonies, or whatever else you desire, and complete the song. You may find that you need to change up the order of these steps to get the best results. Maybe you've written a melody that's kind of complicated and you really need the drums to solidify your rhythms to know that the melody is actually good. Great, add drums. But the reason why I want you to go back to the melody and bass line again and again is because if you write 4 or 5 melodies, which is all you need for a song, you end up with a full song structure and all that's left is to fill in the blanks. And following these 5 steps will keep the melody as the most important part of your song. It also means that you've simplified every other process until the full song is written. From that point, it's just about building the sonic environment that you think is best. So with that, let's get a bit more technical here and look at Noah's melodic habits. I found 4 main ideas that Noah uses in most of his melodies, whether he knows it or not. Please keep in mind that Noah has been writing melodies and exploring his voice for a very long time. This means that he can call on many different tricks, ideas, techniques, and subtle variations so that his melodies don't sound repetitive. However, these things are subtle and intensely personal, and I would rather you find them for yourself. What I think is worth discussing though is the more obvious or broad broad stroke patterns that he uses so you can adopt them and make them your own. For the first pattern, you can often divide Noah's melodies into two smaller rhythmic groups, one fast, the other slow. It doesn't matter which comes first, but they are usually presented as two halves of a whole. The verse for Just Pretend and Nowhere to Go, as well as the chorus for Like a Villain, display this clearly. Fast subdivisions are in red, the slow ones in green. As a side note, the performance of the faster phrases tends to be a bit loose, whereas the slower rhythms are usually pretty clear and act like a hook within the melody. The verse in Just Pretend shows this clearly. Here's a couple of clear notes and then a kind of meandering idea that belongs to the melody, but obviously isn't designed to be the hook. Second pattern is lots of Noah's melodies are based around two neighboring notes, and the whole melody is just dancing between those two. Two-note melodies tend to be more of a verse thing though. You can hear them in Death of Peace of Mind, Limits, and Nowhere to Go. Pattern 3, Noah often climbs note by note from the first scale degree anywhere up to the fifth and then straight back down again. Sometimes he'll just climb up, other times he'll go straight down. The chorus of Nowhere to Go, Limits, and Like a Villain, as well as the pre-chorus of Death of Peace of Mind and Just Pretend highlight this. Pattern 4, many of Noah's melodies feature the fifth and flat sixth scale degree. I would say that these two notes more than any others give Noah his melodic personality, because he seems to favor the relationship of these two notes more than any others. It can be heard in the verse of Like a Villain, the chorus of Limits, the pre-chorus and chorus of the Death of Peace of Mind, and the two verse melodies and pre-chorus of Nowhere to Go. Some of these patterns work well with others and some don't. Trust your own judgment and mix and match these together as you see fit. Noah mostly writes in a minor key, but he does move away from that at times. Noah also uses vocal techniques and melodies that are often associated with rap. Using Nowhere to Go as an example, look at the sheer number of words in this chorus. It's ridiculous, but this is something we'd expect to see in rap. As you develop your skills as a songwriter, you will develop these habits that may not be obvious to you. These habits could be rhythmic, thematic, melodic, or pretty much any other variable in songwriting. This is neither good nor bad, but there are only so many ways that you can use that rhythmic phrase before it starts to sound cliche. But this can be easily fixed by trying to find connections between what you write and changing it up as soon as you notice a pattern. I think Noah does a really good job of balancing his patterns because they're really not that obvious as you're listening to the music. So that's the beginning of what you need to write a Bad Omens song. Start writing a melody with a tone and range that you think is suitable. Explore the rhythmic groupings and melodic habits like we discussed, and then move on to the next step. Chapter 3, the band. Earlier on, I suggested that all you need with your melody is a simple bass line to get a full idea of your song. Once the bass line is established, the rest of the band tends to act like one singular unit that shifts the tonal palette as needed through the sections. Very rarely did I find that the guitars were going off on some adventure that wasn't accompanied by both the bass and synth. And to be fair, the main chord progressions used were the famous 4 chords, being the 1, 3, 6, and 7 in the minor key, or an extremely common progression in metal being the 1, 6, 4. It's worth mentioning that the famous 4 chords can appear in any order. With that said, the most important thing for the band to focus on is the atmosphere or tone. The atmosphere can be quite hard to explain simply because it's highly dependent on the context, and the context is usually dependent on what the vocals are doing. If there's a fragile uncertainty to the vocal performance, then you probably want to match that with a synth bass that's kind of brooding and making you feel uncomfortable, which once again enhances the vocal performance. However, when it's a heart-wrenching chorus, you want the band to be full of energy, adding to the emotion in the vocals. Whatever your bass line is doing is all that the band needs to do. Just play with the rhythms a bit so that it's not totally boring. It's important to consider the drums. Try many different grooves, half-time feels, double-time feels, keeping the pulse, or just a basic beat. Like the atmosphere, what's required here is heavily dependent on the context, but Bad Omens have an undeniable amount of grooviness that underlies their songs. So make your songs groovy, but not complicated. If you're having trouble with this, less is more. Try build elements to support each other in simple ways. If you notice something is starting to get too busy or technical, simplify it and play around with the tones or rhythms. So for the band, the most important thing is the atmosphere or tone that they create. Keep things interesting with rhythmic variations, and don't be afraid to use the same 3 or 4 chords that every other band is using. Chapter 4. Extra details. Here I want to go over a couple of things that I found that I deliberately didn't include in this video because I think they would do you more harm than good, but also because these details are usually pretty easily found by yourself. First of all, I didn't mention the keys that the songs are written in because it does not matter. Compared to me, Noah has an incredibly high voice. Unlike buying a new guitar or new amp, my vocal range is a physical attribute that I cannot replace. We're all stuck with what we've got. So instead of copying the keys that Noah uses, write a melody and put it in a range that feels best for your voice. Choose the key based on that. No one will be upset if a great voice needs to utilize a weird tuning option. But good luck getting anyone to listen to your song if you're trying to sing in a range that doesn't work for your voice. Next point, lots of Bad Omens songs have breakdowns. I didn't explore that here because I don't think it's essential to the Bad Omens experience. Sure, it is the moment where the band gets to shine, but I don't think it's necessary. If you want to write breakdowns, I'm sure there's loads of tutorials online on how to do it, and I may even make one myself someday. But breakdowns can be written with two basic concepts: dynamics and simplicity. To make something sound huge, you need to put it right next to something that sounds tiny. If you slowly build to something, you'll lose the impact of the hugeness that you're trying to get in this breakdown. So that means have a whole bunch of hard hits and a whole bunch of silence. And every drum part is played in half time, which is essentially just more space but on a drum kit. And breakdowns are inherently simple. It's usually the whole band just playing a one-note groove in perfect unison. And finally, lyrical concepts. I didn't speak about this because I found that Noah most often spoke about either being backstabbed, being lied to, or some other version of being the holder of truth while other people are actively working to hide the truth. This is fine. Everyone can connect with that experience and no one enjoys it. Don't get me wrong, I don't have any problem with his lyrics, but the range of lyrical topics seems to be quite narrow. Life itself is an endlessly complicated and interesting thing. Writing lyrics on one small subset of the vastness of human experience doesn't exactly invite contemplation. So to sum up this video, the genius of Bad Omens lies in Noah's abilities to convey emotion through his vocal performance. If you can capture the emotion like he does, which notes or chords you might use become utterly insignificant. Beyond that, the band needs to enhance whatever emotion that Noah's trying to convey. If you can't get the emotion right, apply some of Noah's techniques that we've discussed and you'll be on your way. That's all for today. Catch you next time.